Do you want me to pretend you matter tonight? Or can I just be honest from the start? She said that while adjusting her necklace. No whisper. No joke. Just loud enough for the entire table to hear as the waiter poured wine into my glass. Her tone was light. Casual. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just at her phone. Then she smiled at her screen, not at me. Forks paused. Eyes flicked between us. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I think I forgot how. Someone cleared their throat. Her boss chuckled under his breath. The woman from HR looked away and started slicing her salmon like it was therapy. Me? I just sat there, heat flooding into my ears, mouth dry, mind racing through every possible reason for her to say something like that in front of colleagues, clients, strangers. 5 minutes earlier, I was complimenting the lighting. I thought we were having a good evening. Now I was waiting for someone, anyone, to tell me I imagined it. But no one did. She went on talking like it hadn't happened, describing a marketing pivot and joking about conference badges. Every word after that one sentence sounded like static in my ears. I couldn't focus. I just stared at the half-melted butter on the bread plate between us. What did she mean? Why did she say it? Was this planned? Then Nash, the tall one with the Italian loafers and the voice like velvet, leaned forward and said, "You have such a sharp sense of humor, Marnie. Brutal, but clean. I like that." She smiled. At him. That real smile she used to save for me after we paid the electric bill or when I brought her coffee before meetings. I still said nothing. What was I supposed to say? She'd already made it clear. I didn't matter. So I waited until her laughter rang one more time, stood up mid-sentence, placed my napkin over my untouched food, and left. No one stopped me. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not even her. But here's the thing. As I walked down that long hallway out of the restaurant, past the bar and the host stand, something clicked. This wasn't a slip. It wasn't a bad joke. It was the first time she let the truth slip, and everyone at that table already knew it but me. I should have kept walking. Should have called a cab. Instead, I turned back. Not to beg. Not to fight. To listen. Because if she wanted to be honest tonight, so did I. And what I heard next turned that sentence into the least cruel thing she said that night. I made it halfway down the hallway before my spine stiffened. I stopped beside a modern art sculpture of what looked like a melting swan, just far enough from the private dining room that they couldn't see me, but close enough to hear. The music from the restaurant was duller out here, but the voices? Crystal. That cold, brittle laughter I just escaped was still echoing. Hers, mostly. Light, flirtatious, filled with someone else's attention. Nash was still talking, his voice smooth and confident. "He took it well," he said, chuckling. "Did you see his face?" For a second, I thought he'd throw the soup. More laughter. My lungs tightened. It wasn't just a dinner. It wasn't just one sentence. It was a performance. One where I'd been cast as the dull, outdated prop who didn't know when his role had ended. "She trained him well," said another voice, female, amused, possibly that redhead from earlier. "Seriously, Marnie. 10 years? You should give a seminar on image management." Image management. Not love. Not partnership. Not life. Image. I pressed my palm to the cold wall. It grounded me. Kept me from walking back in there and demanding an answer I wasn't ready to hear. Instead, I did what I've always done, I observed. Quiet. Careful. The way I used to watch her tie her hair back before job interviews. The way I listened through the door when she practiced presentations, muttering stats to herself in the hallway at midnight. But this wasn't practice. It was routine. And I was the only one who hadn't read the script. Then I heard the worst part, something so normal, so relaxed, it struck deeper than anything cruel ever could. "I told you," she said between sips. "He's harmless. He won't make noise. He'll go home, pet his bird, maybe journal about it. That's who he is. He folds, not fights." Everyone laughed. It was a knowing laugh, one they'd all earned in a conversation I'd never been invited to. My throat burned. My hands were shaking, not with rage. Rage would have meant I had power, but with embarrassment. She wasn't lying. I was that guy. I would go home. I would stay quiet. Because confrontation felt like failing a test I never signed up for. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't going home. Not this time. I left the restaurant completely. Didn't look back. I walked 3 blocks to a bus stop even though I had my car in the lot. I didn't want to drive. I wanted to sit, like a stranger in my own life, and let the world pass by while I figured out what the hell just happened. As the bus pulled up, my phone vibrated. A text from Marnie. "Don't overthink it. Just a joke." That was it. That one message, that lazy lie, that insult wrapped in a digital shrug, did something I didn't expect. It didn't hurt. It didn't confuse me. It clarified everything. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't worried that I'd overheard or left or didn't come home. She wasn't even curious where I was. Because in her mind, I wasn't a person anymore. I was furniture. Background. A detail she kept too long and now used as set decoration. And if she thought that, I had to wonder how many other people did too. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't go to a hotel. I went somewhere that would give me answers. Somewhere I never thought I'd go. Somewhere she told me never to touch. Her work laptop, which, thanks to a mistake she never knew she made, was still logged into our shared network drive. And what I found there was the opposite of a joke. It was a timeline. With names. With pictures. With dates. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was scheduled. The moment I opened her work laptop, it greeted me like it was relieved to finally speak. No password prompt. Marnie had once bragged about never wasting time with useless login screens. I used to roll my eyes. Now I was grateful. It opened to her company dashboard, where rows of tabs and bookmark tools lined the screen. At first, it looked like nothing more than a high-level marketing planner, campaign timelines, vendor contacts, and graphs. I was about to close it and admit to myself I was spiraling, until I noticed a folder labeled simply, Clockwork. Clockwork? I clicked. It opened to a subfolder labeled with years. 2019, 2020, 2021. She had folders named after years like she was archiving time itself. I opened the current one, 2025. Inside was a document called Quarter 2, Overlay Strategy.docs. Innocent enough. But when I opened it, my hands began to sweat. It wasn't marketing. It wasn't even business. It was personal. Deeply personal. It began with a sentence, bolded and underlined. Perception is the only currency. Maintain control of the story. Below that, tables. Detailed logs. Color-coded entries like she was managing multiple lives. April 4th, Nash, meet rooftop bar, 6:30. Wear white. Leave separately. April 9th, Ethan, dinner at home. Play nostalgic Spotify playlist. Wear glasses. April 10th, Nash, hotel, room 708. Use debit, not corporate. I froze. It kept going. A schedule of deception. I was in it, marked like a task. A scene in a script. Everything down to my favorite meals was noted, not as kindness, but as strategy. The Spotify playlist she put on last Sunday while we cooked dinner? Planned. Meant to reset the emotional tone. Her words, not mine. And there were photos. Buried in a subfolder named Visual Anchors, like they were graphic assets for a pitch. But they weren't. They were screenshots of text threads, selfies with Nash, and even recordings of voice memos she left herself, ideas for how to exit the marriage quietly, protect her image, redirect sympathy. There was one note that made my heart actually skip. He'll collapse emotionally, but not react. That's the safest type. No PR damage. That was me. That was what she thought I was worth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the woman I thought I knew, reduced to a digital strategist of emotional manipulation. Her cruelty wasn't sharp. It was methodical, cold, thought out. Like she'd spent months preparing to make me doubt my own instincts until it would have felt easier to blame myself than face what she'd done. But I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. The anger hadn't settled in. What I felt was deeper. Disorientation. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was realizing I never had her, not really. I was her decoy life. Her disguise. And I couldn't stop looking. Because just when I thought I'd seen the worst of it, I opened a file dated 2 weeks ago, labeled Marnie's Voice. Audio test. It was a memo to herself. I hit play. Okay, reminder, when the campaign launches, make sure to time the Ethan separation announcement during the rollout. Emotion generates traction. I'll have to frame it as irreconcilable growth, avoid blame narrative. Maybe say we outgrew each other. Keep it vague. Friendly. That last word echoed, friendly. She was rehearsing how to abandon me. Not even hide it. Just package it better. Like I was a dress she didn't wear anymore but still wanted to donate with the tag on. I sat there for over an hour. The parrot, Grayson, was quiet the whole time. I think he sensed it. That something irreversible had happened. That something in the air had snapped. When I finally closed the laptop, it wasn't to stop looking. It was because I knew I couldn't unsee any of it. And somewhere deep in my chest, a tiny ember flickered. Not rage. Not revenge. Clarity. I wouldn't tell her what I found. Not yet. Because she thought I would fold quietly. And I wanted her to feel something she never planned for. Uncertainty. The key turned in the lock at exactly 10:41 p.m. I watched the door from the kitchen table, still and silent, as if I were studying the behavior of a wild animal in its natural habitat. Marnie stepped in wearing her tailored navy coat, heels clicking softly on the entryway tiles. She didn't call out. Didn't ask why the lights were off, why the air felt heavier. She just sighed and dropped her bag on the bench like every other night, like this was just Thursday, and the dinner had been a mild success. I'd already closed the laptop, already disconnected her cloud sync. I didn't delete anything. I made copies, multiple, but left everything in its place, untouched. I wanted her to believe nothing had changed. That's how she operated, right? Control the story. Keep it clean. She walked into the kitchen, stopped when she saw me. "Oh," she said, mildly surprised. "You're up." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She blinked once, twice. Then her eyes narrowed, scanning for signs. She was reading me, trying to gauge if I'd heard something, seen something, felt something she hadn't planned. "You okay?" she asked, moving to the fridge as if casual conversation could glue the air back together. "I'm fine," I said, too calmly. She opened the fridge, stared at nothing, then shut it without grabbing anything. "I texted you," she added. "Guess your phone died." "No," I replied. "It didn't." There was a beat, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Not panic, strategy. She was recalculating. "Well, I hope you didn't take that dinner too seriously," she said with a soft chuckle, carefully placing a glass under the filtered tap. "Some of the jokes got out of hand. You know how Trent is." "You're right," I said, folding my hands. Some of the jokes were very revealing. That froze her. The silence between us was so thick, I could hear the soft buzzing of the fridge motor. She didn't ask what I meant. That told me everything. She was trying to decide how much I knew. Whether to pivot, confess, or play the long game. That's what liars do when caught between doubt and certainty, they stall. I let her twist in it. Then, softly, I said, "When were you going to tell me about the timeline?" Her hand trembled slightly. She placed the glass down on the counter too quickly, water sloshing over the rim. "I don't know what you mean." You know that moment in movies when the villain realizes the hero's known all along? This wasn't that. There was no mask slipping, no dramatic gasp. Marnie simply went still, like a deer clocking a predator too late to run. I stood up slowly, walked over to the coat rack and lifted the envelope I had prepared hours ago. Inside, printed copies of her notes, a few of the emails, one of the photos she didn't know had metadata attached. I didn't throw it at her. I didn't even hand it to her. I just placed it gently on the counter next to her hand and whispered, "Open it when you're alone." She stared at it as if it were something alive. "I'm not doing this with you tonight," she said after a long pause, trying to summon annoyance, authority, any emotion that might ground her again. "I know," I replied. "That's the point." She looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks, maybe months. And I think it scared her that I wasn't crying, that I wasn't yelling, that I wasn't folding. She wasn't prepared for a quiet storm. She wasn't prepared for me to look like I'd already left, even as I stood right in front of her. And maybe that's why she didn't follow me when I walked out the front door. Because this time, for the first time, I wasn't leaving to cool off or calm down. I was leaving to decide if I ever wanted to come back. And something deep inside me already knew the answer. She didn't message me that night. Not once. I expected some performance, maybe a guilt-laced voicemail or a last-ditch, "You misunderstood." But nothing came. Just silence. As if the house had digested my exit like it was overdue. As if the script she rehearsed never included a scene where I chose to vanish. I stayed at an old extended stay suite near the airport. It smelled like a mix of lemon cleaner and forgotten microwavable meals. But it was anonymous, quiet, and perfect for what I needed, space. I didn't call friends. Didn't rant online. I needed to observe without influence. Think without commentary. That's always been my problem. I let people write their truths in my margins. Not anymore. On the third day, she finally texted, "Marnie, hope you're safe. If you want to talk like adults, I'm here." A strange sentence. If you want to talk like adults. The implication wasn't concern, it was a jab. A framing. As if my silence was immature. As if her betrayal was grown up. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched from a distance. I knew she'd try something soon, and she did. The following afternoon, I returned to the house for exactly 20 minutes. I timed it. I didn't tell her. She wasn't home, but the scent of her perfume lingered like a ghost in every corner. I grabbed my essentials, passport, laptop, charger, cash. Then I took something she hadn't expected me to want. Her backup phone. She kept it in her nightstand, for emergencies, she once said. I always thought it was a backup for her business line, synced only when needed. But she had once carelessly left it unlocked in front of me while brushing her teeth. I remembered the passcode. I don't forget small things. Not anymore. Back at the suite, I plugged it in. It booted slowly, like it was resisting its own exposure. The home screen was minimal. Fewer apps. No social media. Just messages, voice memos, and a call log. And that's when I found it. A contact named Ashland Group, safe. I didn't know what the name meant, but I recognized the number. I'd seen it flash across her laptop screen weeks ago. She'd claimed it was a freelance client. But the messages? They weren't about business. They were about me. I scrolled carefully. Dozens of texts. Most of them brief. Some chilling in their casualness. Ashland, he's still unaware? Marnie, yes. Quiet type. Useful but fading. Another. Ashland, legal structure drafted. You'll retain majority. Marnie, perfect. We'll nudge things forward after Q2 dinner. After the Q2 dinner. That was the dinner. The one where she said, some relationships are just for appearances. She hadn't been testing me. She'd been flipping the final switch. This wasn't cheating. It wasn't even betrayal in the romantic sense. It was erasure. She'd partnered with someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe a silent partner, to shift assets, rewrite public narrative, and engineer a clean exit from the life she built on my loyalty. She wasn't leaving because she fell out of love. She was leaving because I was no longer required. And yet, her plan had a flaw. She assumed I'd stay silent, that I wouldn't dig, that I wouldn't interfere. That was her mistake. That was the only variable she didn't account for. Because on the sixth day, she finally broke silence. She showed up at my temporary place. No warning. I saw her reflection first, dark coat, red lipstick, holding takeout from our old favorite Thai spot. Like we were just going through a little married hiccup. Like this was a reboot. I didn't open the door. I watched through the peephole. She knocked once, smiled lightly, adjusted her scarf, then knocked again. And then she said, soft and sweet, Elwood, I think we both overreacted. Can we talk about what comes next? That sentence, delivered with the smoothness of a campaign rollout, sent something through my body that didn't feel like fear. It felt like arrival. I knew then this wasn't a woman begging for forgiveness. It was a woman resetting the story. But what she didn't know was that I'd already started writing my own version. And she wasn't the narrator anymore. I didn't answer the door. Not out of spite. Not even out of fear. I just watched. Marnie stood there for a full minute. Maybe hoping I'd cave. Maybe counting on the silence to soften me. She even knocked once more, lightly. The kind of knock you'd give a friend after a misunderstanding, not a husband you schemed against. When she finally walked away, I stayed frozen behind the door for another 5 minutes, just listening. To her footsteps. To her absence. To the echo of the one person who had once known exactly how to reach me, now realizing she no longer could. But I wasn't just avoiding her. I was preparing for what came next. Because now I knew what kind of game she was playing, and I knew better than to walk into it unarmed. I needed information. Leverage. And not from her. There was one name in that call log that had shown up more than once. A man I had nearly forgotten existed. Because she'd made sure of it. Connor Bales. We were never close, not really. He was a friend of hers from way back, college days. A photographer with a caffeine addiction and a tendency to overshare on social media. I hadn't seen his name pop up in years. She used to mention him all the time when we were first dating. Then, suddenly, nothing. It was like he'd been scrubbed from our shared life. But there he was. A frequent contact on her backup phone. Especially in the weeks before that business dinner. I searched for him. He still ran a small studio on the east side, specializing in high-end portraits and lifestyle branding for startups. His website was clean, polished, like everything she admired. I showed up unannounced. The studio was minimal and quiet, white walls, camera gear stacked like museum pieces. Connor looked older, thinner, less like a friend and more like someone who'd aged through too many unsaid things. When he saw me, he blinked slowly, like my presence was part of a dream he'd once promised never to speak aloud. Elwood, he said cautiously. Didn't expect to see you. Neither did I replied. But you're going to want to hear why I'm here. He didn't ask me to leave. Maybe he saw it on my face. Maybe he'd been waiting. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I sat across from him, folded my coat, and placed my phone on the table like a recorder, though it wasn't on. I found her notes, I said. The voice memos. The calendar. I saw everything. His hands clenched the edge of the table. But he didn't look surprised. Instead, he said, she told me you'd never look. That you'd retreat. She was almost right, I said quietly. He exhaled sharply. Then I owe you an apology. That sentence caught me off guard. He stood up, walked across the room, and retrieved a small hard drive from a drawer. No explanation. No hesitation. He handed it to me like someone surrendering a weapon they never should have been holding. What's on this? I asked. Proof, he said. Insurance. For myself, mostly. But also for anyone who ever got in our way. My stomach twisted. Why keep it? Because Marnie doesn't destroy people in the open. She erodes them over time. Makes them doubt, question, shrink. I saw what she did to a client once. Man ended up hospitalized with a breakdown. She smiled at his wife at the funeral. I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. She approached me a month ago, Connor went on. Said she needed photos for a narrative realignment. Said she was going to separate gently from you and wanted to control public tone. I thought it was PR language. Until I saw her documents. Then why help her? I asked, sharper than I meant. He looked ashamed. Because I'm weak. Because she convinced me it was harmless. And because I didn't think you'd ever know. That was the part that stung. Not the betrayal. Not the secrets. The fact that so many people had banked on my silence. I stood up, drive in hand. I'm not going to the police, I said. And I'm not starting a war. Connor nodded, confused. Then what are you doing? I paused at the door. Something she's never seen before, I said. I'm giving her exactly what she wants. Publicly. And privately? I met his eyes. Privately? I'm going to remind her I was never harmless. Just quiet. As I walked back to my car, the pieces began to fall into place. I wasn't building a revenge plan. I was building a mirror. And soon, I'd let her stand in front of it. The first post appeared on her LinkedIn the following Monday morning. Polished. Measured. Drenched in that corporate therapy language she loved. After a transformative decade, Ethan and I have decided to part ways with mutual respect and deep appreciation. Growth sometimes means letting go with grace. Please respect our privacy as we take our next steps. The photo attached was a black and white candid of us from 5 years ago. We were laughing. I'd made her tea that day after she'd lost a pitch. She said it was the first time someone had seen her when she wasn't winning. And now she was using that moment like a curtain call. Within hours, the likes poured in. Comments from colleagues, industry people, thought leaders she'd networked with at panels and rooftop events. All praising her strength. Her vulnerability. One even wrote, "You're an inspiration. Letting go is its own kind of love." I watched it all from the same couch where I'd once memorized her coffee order. But here's what made it poetic. She thought she'd published the ending. She thought I was still in the audience, watching the lights go down. What she didn't know was that my beginning had already started. That same morning, I launched my own statement. Not public. Not performative. Not even about her directly. I uploaded a small blog post on a quiet, respected professional journal. Something few people outside our industry would even notice. The article was titled, Narrative Architecture, How Emotional Framing Undermines Accountability in Public Breakups. It was calm. Academic. No names. No accusations. Just an autopsy of the strategies people use to exit cleanly without confronting damage. It dissected language like mutual and growth, and letting go with grace, breaking them down as tools of image management rather than genuine reflection. Within 2 days, it was picked up by 3 ethics newsletters. Quiet virality. The kind she couldn't scream at. The kind that scratched under her narrative like a whisper she couldn't block. The next thing that happened? She emailed me. Subject line, "Really? No greeting. Just one sentence. This doesn't make you look better, Ethan." I replied with 2 words. It wasn't about me. That's when the cracks began. First came the missed call from her assistant, someone who had never contacted me directly in all our years of marriage. She left a voicemail stammering about timing overlaps and public perception misalignment. I deleted it. Then came Connor's message. She knows I gave you the drive. She called me screaming. But still, she didn't call me. She couldn't. Because calling me meant acknowledging that I wasn't broken. That I hadn't collapsed. That I was standing in the same story, not as a background character, but as an author with my own pen. A week passed. I moved out of the suite and into a temporary loft 2 cities over. Quiet. High windows. A place without memory. Grayson the parrot came with me. He stopped mimicking her laugh. Now he mostly whistled to himself, softly, like he was adjusting too. Then, one evening, I got a delivery. No note. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box. It was the exact box I had used 3 years ago to propose a second vow renewal to her on our 7th anniversary. I had written her a letter then, about forgiveness, loyalty, choosing each other even when it's hard. I'd placed it in that box with a new ring. She had cried when she read it. Told me I still made her feel like the best version of herself. Now the box was back. Empty. Except for one thing, a folded version of her original voice memo transcript. The one she'd recorded about when to release our separation news. I hadn't printed it. She had. At the bottom, she'd scribbled in red ink. I didn't think you had it in you. She still didn't get it. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't some theatrical comeback. This was me refusing to disappear just because she'd already rehearsed my exit. But the real twist? She had one more move planned. One last act of control. A deeply personal strike, quiet, invisible, and meant to feel like a technicality. It arrived in a manila envelope the next morning, and what was inside nearly sent me to my knees. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a time bomb. Plain. Thin. But I knew what was inside before I even opened it. Separation papers. Drafted, dated, and already signed by her. A typed cover letter from her attorney said they'd anticipated this next step and hoped to maintain discretion for all involved parties. I smiled at that phrase. Discretion had been her specialty until now. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already filed my own paperwork 3 days earlier. Not reactionary. Not emotional. Just factual. Clean. Controlled. Like her. Only mine had one critical difference. I hadn't requested silence. I had requested narrative rights. There's a clause in certain dissolution filings when intellectual property or public image is involved. Most people skip it. She didn't. Her lawyer didn't. But I didn't. And because of that, I now own the rights to the story of our marriage, publicly, personally, and professionally. That was my choice. Not for vengeance, but for truth. Because I never wanted to destroy her. I just wanted my voice back. I didn't respond to her lawyer. I sent her a simple message. You were right. I was quiet. But quiet doesn't mean absent. You wrote the first half. I'll write the second. Alone. And for once, not as your husband, just as me. I didn't hear from her again. And it felt peaceful. I took the next month off. No dramatic exit. No disappearing act. I told my clients I was recharging. I meant it. I walked more. Read more. I even started volunteering at a local animal rescue, helping them digitize adoption files. The first night I showed up, I met a woman named Raina. Not flashy. Not loud. She spoke to animals like they understood. And maybe they did. We started having coffee after the shifts. At first it was just light talk, books, odd playlists, her fear of elevators. But then came longer conversations. Laughter. Silence that didn't feel heavy. The kind that holds space instead of demanding to be filled. One night she said, "You seem like someone who just got out of something that was all about appearances." I paused, then smiled. "You have no idea," I said. "But I think I'm finally showing up." The next morning, I found Grayson, the parrot, sitting at the edge of his perch, watching sunlight move across the floor. He whistled once. It wasn't Marnie's laugh anymore. It was something else. Something new. Maybe mine. Final note. No explosive endings. No courtroom drama. No grand